Have you ever, chased a major goal? I mean, maybe it was a grueling promotion at work or saving up for years for a bigger
Oh,
house.
sure. Or even just, finally hitting some elusive personal milestone.
Exactly. You chase it, you finally cross the finish line, you pop the champagne, and then within days, really, you find yourself already plotting the next goal.
Yeah, it's so common.
It's this incredibly universal experience, right? Where you achieve exactly what you thought you wanted, and instead of feeling a lasting, permanent sense of victory, you look up and realize the finish line has magically moved another 10 miles down the road.
Yeah.
Why does that finish line never stay still?
Well, it's kind of like the sensation of reaching the summit of a mountain, only to realize you're just on a foothill,
Hmm.
and you instantly start looking for the actual peak. I mean, it is an exhausting way to live, but it's fundamentally how human beings operate.
And that exhaustion is basically our target today. We are taking a deep dive into a really fascinating stack of source material, and it's centered on what's known as the enough paradox.
It's a great concept. It really is. Our mission today is to unpack one of the oldest puzzles in human history, which is why the concept of more rarely, if ever, becomes enough.
Right, the endless treadmill.
Yes. And we're going to be looking at this through a few distinct lenses. So, ancient evolutionary biology, modern neuroscience, and our deep cultural conditioning, just to try and understand the mechanics of why we are always running. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand modern dissatisfaction, we actually have to strip away the modern world entirely and look at the environments that built our brains.
Yeah, we have to go way back, back to the Pleistocene epoch, because our brains evolved in environments that were defined almost entirely by scarcity and extreme environmental volatility.
So imagine two ancient humans living hundreds of thousands of years ago. They're out foraging on the savannah.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The first one gathers a basket of berries, assesses the situation, and says, I have enough calories for today. I'm going to stop gathering, conserve my energy, and just relax.
Sounds totally reasonable. Right. But the second human looks at their full basket and feels this, nagging anxiety. They think, well, I have enough food for today, sure, but I'm going to keep gathering just a little more, just in case.
And see, that phrase, just in case, is essentially the hinge upon which all of human history swings.
Wow.
Oh, absolutely. Because eventually the environment is going to turn on them. A drought arrives, or a brutally harsh winter sets in, or maybe a rival group pushes them out of their territory.
Something bad happens.
Exactly. When that unpredictable volatility hits, brutal logic dictates survival. The one who hoarded, the one who burned extra calories to keep gathering despite having enough in the moment, that is the one who survives the famine.
Which means we are the descendants of the hoarders.
We are.
We are the genetic legacy of the individuals who were fundamentally incapable of being satisfied.
We really are. For countless generations, natural selection relentlessly favored the anxious and the unsatisfied. In those ancient environments, more wasn't a luxury. It was a mathematical equation for safety.
More food, more safety.
Right. More stored food meant you didn't starve when the herd migrated.
Yeah.
More flint tools meant you could defend your territory. So dissatisfaction wasn't a character flaw. It was a highly optimized survival mechanism.
Okay, wait. If evolution built this system, why hasn't it updated?
Russ.
I mean, we aren't dodging droughts on the savannah anymore. Most of us aren't foraging for our literal survival day to day. It feels like our brains are running, I don't know, Stone Age Survival 1.0 in a world of 247 supermarkets.
Yeah, supermarkets, temperature-controlled homes.
Amazon Prime. I mean, if the environment has completely shifted from scarcity to abundance, why are we still aggressively pursuing more when immediate survival is no longer the issue?
Well, what's fascinating here is the concept of evolutionary mismatch. Biological hardware takes, millions of years of selective pressure to fundamentally alter.
Right, it's incredibly slow.
Super slow. And we have only been living in this modern environment of hyperabundance for a tiny fraction of a blink of an eye in evolutionary time. We are essentially navigating a space-age world with a Stone Age brain. And the source material points directly to neuroscience, specifically the dopamine system, to explain the mechanics of this mismatch.
Right, and we know from previous deep dives that dopamine is largely misunderstood by the general public. It's frequently labeled as the pleasure chemical, the reward we get when we achieve something.
Which is completely wrong.
Exactly. Neurobiologically, it's actually a motivation neuromodulator. It's all about anticipation.
It is entirely about anticipation. The dopamine circuitry, specifically the mesolimbic pathway, it's wired to fire furiously when we are predicting a reward. not when we actually acquire it.
Wow.
Yeah, it explicitly rewards the wanting of a thing.
So it's driving the pursuit. But how does that ancient pursuit mechanism react when it's exposed to completely frictionless modern environments?
Oh, it short circuits. Think about the concept of reward prediction error. Your brain releases dopamine to propel you toward a goal. Let's use your Amazon Prime example.
Okay, yeah.
You find an item, you anticipate how it will improve your life, and your dopamine spikes. You click buy, you track the package, the anticipation builds.
Hitting refresh on the tracking page.
Exactly. But when the box actually arrives, the reward prediction has been resolved.
Yeah.
The brain no longer needs to motivate you to get the thing because you already have the thing. So dopamine levels rapidly drop to baseline, or even below baseline. The thrill just vanishes.
The cardboard goes in the recycling bin, and the item just becomes another piece of background furniture in your house.
Right. And if having the object produced a permanent, sustained dopamine high, our ancient ancestors would have eaten one good meal, felt completely neurologically satisfied forever, and then just sat under a tree and starved to death a week later.
Because they lacked the chemical motivation to go hunt again.
Exactly. Your biology demands that you keep moving, so it intentionally designs the excitement to be transient.
Okay, but that biological drive can't apply to every single aspect of our lives, right? Like,
Yeah.
we have to separate physiological reality from psychological desire.
How do you mean?
Well, because physical needs genuinely have an endpoint. If you are incredibly thirsty, a glass of water holds enormous, perhaps infinite value in that exact moment.
Mm.
But once you drink your fill, that value drops off a cliff.
Oh, for sure.
You do not want a second glass, let alone a fifth or a 10th. The physical need is quenched. The body has a built-in feedback loop that just screams, stop.
Yeah, that is a perfect illustration of a physiological homeostatic mechanism.
Oh,
The body regulates temperature, hunger, and thirst with really strict upper limits.
right.
But abstract psychological desires operate in a completely different neurological landscape.
Right.
When we shift from gathering calories to gathering status or prestige or social admiration, there is no biological full signal.
Because status is inherently relative. You can always be more famous or wield more influence or, I don't know, have a slightly nicer lawn than your neighbor.
Yeah, comparison has no ceiling. If you measure your success by comparing it to your peers, the goalposts are basically attached to a moving vehicle. Every victory you achieve becomes temporary. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as hedonic adaptation.
Hedonic adaptation.
Right. When you experience a positive change in your life, a massive raise, a new relationship, moving to a better city, you experience a temporary boost in happiness. But very quickly, habituation kicks in. Your brain recalibrates. That incredible achievement simply becomes your new normal.
The source material uses the term the treadmill for this, which is a classic psychology metaphor. You're sweating, you're running faster, putting in more miles, but staying in the exact same place.
Exactly.
But honestly, I think a better way to visualize this mechanism is like an internal thermostat. It's less like a treadmill and more like a busted climate control system in your house.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like no matter how much you crank up the heat by adding a promotion, a luxury car, or a million followers, the system eventually kicks in and just resets your baseline emotional state back to 70 degrees.
A thermostat is a highly accurate way to frame it. You are pouring massive amounts of energy into the system to change the temperature, but the system is designed to always pull you back to equilibrium. You adapt to the luxury until the luxury becomes a necessity, and then, well, you need a new luxury to feel the heat again.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because everything we have discussed so far is purely biological, right?
Right.
But the source material introduces a massive pivot here. It brings up the blank slate theory, arguing that this relentless pursuit of accumulation is actually entirely learned. It argues that no child is born chasing endless material wealth, and that society conditions this into us.
Yeah, that is the pivotal argument in the text regarding cultural influence. The premise is that from the moment we are born, our subconscious minds begin absorbing a pervasive societal narrative that more is always better, long before our conscious minds can critically evaluate that message.
Hold on, wait, stop right there. You literally just spent the last 10 minutes meticulously explaining that we are biologically hardwired by millions of years of evolution to always want more.
I did.
You said the dopamine system forces us to hoard for survival. So how can the source material claim we are simultaneously a blank slate? That is a massive contradiction. I mean, we either have an ancient biological drive for more, or we are a blank slate manipulated by culture. It cannot be both.
It's an excellent catch.
Yeah.
And Resolving that apparent contradiction is where the real insight of this deep dive lies. We are not a true blank slate in terms of our drives. The biology provides the engine.
Okay, the engine.
Right. We are born with a restless, dopamine-driven engine that seeks security and fears scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
But culture provides the map.
Yeah. So biology creates the hunger, but culture dictates what we put on the menu.
Precisely. A toddler is not born wanting a Rolex or a specific brand of designer sneakers. They're born with a vague, generalized drive for social inclusion and resource security. It is our specific cultural operating system that hijacks that ancient biological engine and points it toward endless material consumption.
So how did that happen? If hunter-gatherers were just worried about having enough berries and meat to survive the winter, at what point did human culture build this map that points us toward endless accumulation?
Well, the shift begins historically with the agricultural revolution. When humans were nomadic foragers, you physically couldn't hoard much. You couldn't carry 20 spears. And if you killed a mammoth, you couldn't hoard the meat because it would rot.
Makes sense.
So nomadic societies were largely egalitarian by necessity, but agriculture invented the grain silo,
And a grain silo allows you to store surplus.
a massive surplus. For the first time in human history, an individual could accumulate more calories than they could consume in a lifetime, and it wouldn't spoil. That surplus created wealth. Wealth created hierarchy. Hierarchy created the concept of status based on accumulation. Once human societies realized that surplus is equated to power, the cultural messaging began to adapt to reinforce that system.
So it goes far beyond just modern advertising. It's not just like corporations trying to sell us cars. This conditioning is woven into the very fabric of post-agricultural civilization.
It is deeply systemic. Modern economic systems fundamentally depend on endless growth and consumption just to remain stable. But even beyond economics, look at our belief systems. Across various historical traditions, we often frame contentment as complacency or laziness.
Oh, definitely.
We treat relentless ambition as an unquestionable virtue. We explicitly frame a lack of material success as a failure of moral character.
It's that societal whisper that tells you you are almost complete. Just achieve one more level, buy one more thing, reach this next tax bracket, and then you will be a successful, valid person.
Yes, exactly.
It is like an algorithmic infinite scroll, but applied to human existence. The moment you reach the bottom of the page, society just auto-loads the next set of goals, so you never actually log off.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer weight of what we are up against becomes clear. You have your ancient neurobiology pushing you from the inside, deploying dopamine to ensure you never feel settled.
Right.
Simultaneously, you have a globally interconnected cultural environment pulling you from the outside, utilizing sophisticated algorithms and deeply ingrained social pressures to ensure you keep producing and consuming.
Okay. We have a biologically programmed engine built for scarcity and a culturally drawn map pointing us toward an ever-receding horizon. So what does this all mean? Where exactly is enough? I mean, if our brains won't give it to us naturally and society actively hides it from us, does enough even exist?
That is the ultimate destination of the source material, and it forces us to discard a very common misconception. Enough is not a metric.
It is not a number.
It is not a specific bank balance, an investment portfolio, a job title, or a follower count. Because, as we see empirically every single day, people reach those external milestones and still wake up feeling a profound sense of lack. Contentment, the text argues, is entirely a cognitive state. It's a shift in attention, not an accumulation of assets.
Switching the brain's focus from acquiring to appreciating, which sounds simple, but it goes against every evolutionary instinct we just talked about.
It requires overriding the default mode network of the brain. You can have a person who possesses very little materially. Maybe they live in a tiny apartment and work a modest job, yet they have trained their attention to focus on the relationships they have, the health they possess, and they feel deeply satisfied.
Yeah.
Right across town, you can have a person who possesses massive generational abundance, mansions, influence, unlimited resources, and they feel intensely deprived because their attention is entirely fixated on the person who has slightly more than them.
Abundance and contentment are completely decoupled. And this brings up a tragic irony that runs through the entire source text. When you look at human civilization objectively, we have become remarkably, terrifyingly skilled at building complex machines and logistical networks to produce material abundance.
Oh, unmatched.
We can mass-produce goods, ship them across the globe in 24 hours, and generate unimaginable wealth. But with all of that technological innovation, we have completely failed to engineer peaceful minds.
We mastered the external environment, but we left our internal environment entirely unmanaged. We unleashed our primitive, scarcity panic biology into a modern playground of infinite stimuli. And we are currently watching the psychological fallout of that mismatch.
Yeah, we really are.
The source argues that understanding this dynamic, learning how to manually override the biological and cultural programming that demands more, is perhaps the greatest psychological challenge of the 21st century.
Which brings this deep dive right back to you, listening to this right now. The very first step to getting off that endless cycle, to fixing that internal thermostat, is simply recognizing that the system is manipulating you. You have to step back and observe the machinery of your own desires.
Exactly.
So I want to ask you to reflect on your own relationship with the concept of enough. Think back in your own life. When was the last time you felt truly, deeply satisfied? Not because you had conquered everything on your to-do list or finally purchased the items sitting in your cart, but because you actually paused and just appreciated exactly what you had, who you were with, and where you were in that specific moment in time.
This raises an important question, one that the source text touches upon when it analyzes why humans are so deeply afraid of simply being.
Yeah.
Why do we feel this compulsive, almost frantic need to constantly be becoming something else?
It's a profound question. And as we wrap up today's deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought experiment to mull over, something that builds on everything we've unpacked today about evolution, dopamine, and society.
We have established that our entire global civilization, our massive stock markets, our relentless technological progress, our sprawling, never-sleeping cities, is fundamentally fueled by this ancient biological glitch of constant dissatisfaction.
Right.
Our world runs on the kinetic energy of billions of people wanting more. So consider this. What would actually happen if humanity suddenly woke up tomorrow and collectively experienced a global cognitive shift, where we finally decided we had enough?
If the biological engine just stopped.
Exactly. If the thermostat stayed at 70 degrees and we stopped trying to turn it up, would human progress grind to a halt? Would our society, which is architecturally built on the necessity of endless consumption, completely collapse into ruin? Or would we finally cross a threshold into a totally new, unprecedented era of human existence? An era where, free from the evolutionary panic for more, we could finally focus our immense capabilities on the quality of our minds and the depth of our connections, rather than the quantity of our possessions.
That is a staggering thing to consider. If the finish line finally stopped moving, who would we actually become? Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us, unpacking the hidden mechanics of our own minds. Take a moment today to appreciate exactly where you are. Until next time, keep questioning the systems around you and stay curious.